Walter Reed was totally for, but ultimately that Marine Corps chaplain taught me about forgiveness, and that helped me a lot. And so now, as I still go there, it's still trying to kind of battle just some of the pain I have, which kind of flares up now and again. The one of the things they do is this art therapy program. It's famous. They're famous for these masks. So it was on the front cover of National Geographic, I think back in 2015. But everyone who goes there in the program, and again, it's this intensive outpatient program. You're there for 10 hours every day. So I think probably half a dev group and Delta has been there, tons of SF. I mean, just there's huge walls inside of NICoE where each unit, and the CIA has got a big wall now too from all of the HAVANA syndrome victims. But it's the SEALs, it's Army, then they have the CCTs and from Air Force, and you design a mask, and it's just mask, and you paint it, and you put it's a creation of art, but it's how you express yourself. And I'm not an artist at all, but it was what I did was kind of this cathartic experience for me where I took a mask and I painted Superman on it, because that's what I thought my kids thought of me. Here I was the guy, the dad who was gone all the time, which sucked, but I was defending them and defending America, and my kids were proud of me. But it was a Superman mask, and then in it was an ice pick, which signified my headaches, and then I overlaid this mask on top of a piece of wood, which I carved the CIA seal, which was cracked in half, because that was the betrayal of the organization. And it's hanging in NICoE right now, and I just talked to the art therapist. She said everybody comes and sees that. That's kind of the signature piece for the CIA portion for the HAVANA syndrome victims. But again, it's Bill Burns has seen it. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, saw it. It's important they see this, because this is the way we've been treated. But making that mask has been really cathartic. But it's again, it's the idea of people that I served with for years and years really abandoned me. It was really sad, and to me to this day, I think anyone who goes public, decides in our old world to be out in the media or do something like this probably has experience with that. I don't know if you feel that same way. Oh yeah. Some of your guests too. I obviously watched Rob O'Neill's interview, which was fantastic, but really interesting piece where you asked him, about what he thought about if people didn't, weren't so positive about him going and talking about his role in the Bin Laden raid, and he said, "Yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore." There was something of that, and because it does matter to all of us, because we're a member of this kind of elite fraternity, and when you get ostracized by that, it can be pretty painful.
Yeah, it sucks. Moving away from it though, it's like, because I've dealt with it a lot, and once you move past it, it's just like freedom.
I agree with you.
It really is.
But there's a process in that.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. And what's interesting to me is as I have been vocal about this issue, and then that ultimately Congress passes legislation called the HAVANA Act, which is going to provide compensation for not necessarily people like me. I don't care. I'm senior and I'm fine financially. But what about the GS11 or GS12 who's medically retired? And so there's going to be some liability from the U.S. government, and so President signed this. I sat, I keep saying we're not talking about politics. We won't, but I sat in a room with Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff, who hate each other. This is the ranking minority and majority member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. They hate each other on every issue except this one, where they totally agree. President signs a law. There's going to be some financial relief for folks, and so all of a sudden, people from the agency, who abandoned me for a long time, are calling me again, and I've had to kind of process that. But I go back to what that Marine Corps chaplain said. Just I'm polite to everyone, but I won't forget the people who abandoned me. And ultimately, you're right, because as what I've tried to do, and I wrote a book on leadership. I do a lot of kind of leadership talks to sports teams now. Baseball is a passion, so I talk to a lot of high school and college baseball teams. The more I get away from, my old world, probably the better, because the end was really unhealthy, both physically but also mentally too. And again, you sit and you talk about, you scratch your head, you're sitting having I'm not supposed to, but if I have a scotch or two. What did I do the last 30 years? And there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. It ended really in a shitty manner. And, I'm 53 years old now, or turning 53 soon. There's got to be another kind of chapter in my journey. I got some time left, I hope.
Before we go into that chapter, let's just rewind a little bit. So knowing that the U.S., China, and Russia are the only three people
Right.
that have, or the only three, governments that have come out and said that they've dabbled in microwave weapons. I mean, you have to have sat at home and thought about who is
Right.
responsible, who targeted you, because it's very obvious they're targeting specific individuals.
Right.
What's going through your head?
Well, so for me, it's easy.
who's
Look, so I
targeting
was,
you?
I had known that, I obviously, as a CIA officer, and I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and the Russians knew who I was always. Interestingly, when I went to Moscow, they didn't want me to make the trip. The Russian embassy in D.C. Tried to cancel the trip. They accused me of trying to come for an operational matter. I'm like, I'm a freaking senior intelligence service officer known to half the planet. I'm coming here to meet with your officials. There's no operational reason for my trip, but I don't think they liked me very much. But it was, to me, my thought on this is the Russians have targeted CIA officials who have been involved in Russian operations because it's part of their hybrid warfare strategy. I mean, if you look at, and China does this too, but this is a step below kinetic events, and so if they're able to take some of our most experienced officers off the battlefield. In a non-attributable way, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me. It also makes sense, obviously Vladimir Putin is someone of, zero morals or ethics. It's right in line with his war crimes and atrocities and assassinations that Russians the Russian state has committed over the last, decade plus. But it does make some sense. And again, it's part of their hybrid warfare strategy. And ultimately, it's been successful because not only has it really taken really quality intelligence officers, out of the intelligence game, it's also caused this huge kind of dissension. I mean, think of it. So when you say HAVANA syndrome, some people roll their eyes. Some people don't believe this. This is exactly what the Russians want.
Yeah.
Is to kind of cause chaos. So in my view, it's been wildly successful. But that's why we got to find out who's doing this. And my contention, and I was heartened to see, I think it was Senator Collins, who's been a big advocate of this. There's certain representatives and senators who are really good on this across the political spectrum because they have constituents who have been affected by this. So, for Senator Collins, there's CIA officers who are from her state, and just like you have Marco Rubio has been a huge proponent of really pushing the U.S. government on this because obviously he cares a lot about Cuba. So. But Senator Collins said, look, we have to get to the bottom of this because this is in essence a war crime. She said it's an act of war, not a war crime. Excuse me. She said it's an act of war against our personnel, and she's right.
Do you think there's any possibility it could have come from within?
No, I don't. I don't. For just to me, there's been. I got to say this carefully. I'm going to quote the GQ article. That's how I stay safe on this. There has been investigations by the U.S. intelligence community, and again, this is from the article in GQ, and it's been repeated other times as well, in which there has been correlation of travel of Russian intelligence officers to the locations where our officers were hit.
No shit. So
now that is a pretty damn strong circumstantial case. What does that mean? I would say keep fucking investigating, keep looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of come out on this, and again it took us 10 years to find Bin Laden. Right now with if you remember Gulf War syndrome from the first Gulf War, I think they've concluded, and this is decades later, that it was exposure to sarin gas. It was from U.S. military strikes on the sarin stockpiles that the Iraqis had, is what sickened hundreds, if not thousands of U.S. military personnel. It's going to take a while to find out what this is.
Yeah.
But I would be amazed if it's not the Russians, or it also could be a combination of adversaries. It could be the Cubans at first. It could be the Russians and the Chinese.
Yeah.
So that's really where I come down on that. But just have the fortitude to keep going. Just because we don't know right now shouldn't stop us.
Are there any foreign intelligence officers that you're aware of that have been hit?
No, that's the mystery.
All been U.S.
It's weird. Canadian diplomats.
Canadians.
But right. So I think that when you talk to the Brits, there's a question of why isn't it happening to them. I can't answer that. I mean, there's a lot of holes in this. because you would think that our allies would be hit by this too. But again, as I when I sit with individuals who have been struck by this, they have suffered severe injuries. I'm one of the fortunate ones, and friends of mine are like, "Mark, you seem fine." I'm like, "Well, compared to others, yeah, I have a fucking headache all the time, still." But ultimately, something really bad happened, and we got to find out what it is. Just because, again, this is one of those total mysteries, and I don't want it to be treated like frickin' UFOs. I mean, it's because sometimes it gets put in that same bin. But this is a little bit different. This is a lot different.
Yeah. Are you still looking for ways to manage the pain or to improve?
Sure. So again, there's been it's really interesting. There's been an outpouring, from just so many people, and there's a new therapy that HAVANA syndrome victims are using. Originally, it was designed for, and it still is for, autistic kids. It's called MERT. It's taking a little magnet and just they tap it against the side of your head. For whatever reason, they started. There's an incredible company. There's some former, in fact, Slab, Brett Slabinski is involved, out in California that has kind of pioneered this for autistic kids. But they came to us, some of the HAVANA syndrome victims, and offered us some treatment. So it's for me, it was kind of life changing. It was 5 weeks. There was an anonymous donor. Don't know who it was. It's fucking expensive. But some great Americans decided to try to help us, and it's changed my life in the sense of my headaches are drastically diminished. And it makes some sense. And so, and I went to Walter Reed after that, and I said, "What do you think of this?" It's called TMS treatment, but but again, it's usually designed for autistic patients or for PTS, but they want to use it for HAVANA syndrome victims. And the Walter Reed doctors, who are pretty, amazingly enough, from the military, they're pretty kind of new age in their thinking. I mean, Walter Reed they're pioneering use of psychedelics and all sorts of stuff, which I freaking love. And I think you talk about this a lot too.
I was going to ask that. Have you looked into psychedelic treatments?
I am interested. I got to see how I'm doing. But ultimately, Walter Reed was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Because it's all about it's your brain waves. So something has happened to our brains with this thing.
Yeah, I did that treatment.
You did,
and a lot of the people that have been on the show have done that treatment, and everybody is having these profound results. Yep, I'd love to connect you.
Yeah,
if you're interested.
For sure, I am. Trust me, because there's been a lot of suffering involved, and so I have my good days and bad days. I'm on a good day right here, probably because I'm enjoying the good life in Nashville, the good food here.
Yeah.
But there's still some shitty times, and again, it's when you get to a point where you'll try anything, and the last thing, it is interesting to me seeing how much I've suffered. I mean, I've been in pain for 4 years, and I know that you can relate to that, and people in the special operations community just after 2 decades of war and all the trauma that people have faced. But the easiest thing to do is it's not even hitting the bottle, because having a drink will help. But it's good that I can see how people get addicted to opioids now, because you're sitting around and you're in pain all the time.
Yeah,
and you will do anything to get rid of that pain. Now, I don't have that addictive personality, I guess, enough where that I'm worried about that. Certainly drinking is not great. And the more I can cut down on that, the better, because if I have a bad headache, you have a scotch or two, you feel better. But that's not a healthy or the right answer. But I'm always looking for new things to do, because again, it's just kind of this lifelong search of how not be in pain all the time.
Well, I'm going to connect you then.
Sure.
I did it, and it changed my whole life.
Yeah.
It's the most profound experience I've ever.
Well, please do. Sean, one of the interesting things is, so I go to NICoE. I go to Walter Reed, and after that time, half a dozen folks that really good friends of mine from your old community, from the SOF community, came out, and these are folks from Dev Group or from Delta or from White SEALs or from Special Forces, and they all said they'd been there too. They just hadn't talked about it. And so, there is, it was a really amazing experience for me, not only because they care about you and they try to help you, but also this is 2 decades. And I'm a little different because the HAVANA syndrome stuff, there's a whole cohort of us being treated there, but just to see what the last 2 decades have done to men and women, in the intelligence special operations world. It's extraordinary. And these are, you know, the toughest people I've ever met in my life, and they are in real bad straits.
Yeah.
And it's sad. But it is 100% real, and it's pretty profound, because these, you know, brain injury is something that, again, in these art therapy sessions, I remember myself and one other person. He gets more credit than I do, but he painted this giant black canvas, you know, something that would be on here, and like the size of that flag. It's all black, but then he took a can of red paint and he threw it on there, and there was kind of a splotch of red paint, and he called it the gunshot. And everyone was like, you know, what the hell is that? And he's like, I wish I was shot. This signifies, because, you know, brain injuries don't show up on anything. Sometimes on MRIs, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But he goes, I wish I was shot, because ultimately then people would believe me. They know how to treat me. So it's pretty scary.
It's humiliating at times to deal with that.
But I tell you, but being, again, I was, you know, being with some of the SEALs and the CCTs, and these are tough son of a bitches, and they were wonderful, kind of part of the cohort to go through. But just, you know, and I mean, this is going to sound, and not to see them vulnerable, but just to see that other people are suffering is actually really important.
Yeah.